Some of you guys are wondering, like, if it's okay to take your parent, if if you should cut your parents off if they're toxic but they have a growth mindset. Like, here's the thing: if they have some toxic traits but they have a high growth mentality, like if they have a high growth mentality, that kind of they have like a high growth mentality. Like, it's up to you if you want to cut them off. Like, if they really have a growth mentality, when it comes, when it comes to all of their toxic traits and not just some of them, then it is okay to not cut them off. But if they only have a growth mentality on some of their toxic traits, but they're willing to keep some of their other toxic traits, then yeah, it's best to cut them off. Like, if they only have a growth mentality on some of their toxic traits and not all of them, then yeah, you should definitely cut them off. Especially if it's not getting any better. If you made videos on like if you made videos on like parenting tips to help your parents become better parents, or you try to help teach your parents to be more understanding and more compassionate towards you, and they're not trying to listen, they just get mad and then they just walk out on you, nothing's getting better, then you should cut them off if they're not trying to learn. Teenagers, just wait till you're an adult and then, well, no. Go to a foster's home. Go to a foster's home. Don't let your parents try to convince you that the foster's home is abusive, because they were no better than you. They abused you when you were younger. Okay, they abused you verbally, physically, and mentally when you was younger. They were no better. So don't let them convince you that it's only wrong when the foster home does it. Like, they've been abusing you your whole childhood. And so don't let them convince you that all foster homes are abusive. Not all foster homes is abusive. And if you went to a foster's home and that foster's home is abusive, find a way to snitch on that foster's home and then go to another one. So here's the thing: if your parents were physically, verbally, and mentally abusive towards you, don't let them convince you if they were the that they were the perfect parent when you consider going to a foster's home. Just just have the foster's home number, like find some start to get to that foster's home, because they just gonna be complaining about you, bringing you into this world to complain about you, then they don't need you anyway. They don't need you, so you can go take your business somewhere else and find a new home. Kids and teens, little kids and teens. So here's the thing: if your parents have a growth mentality when it comes to all of their toxic traits, then it's okay to not cut them off as long as they're willing to grow. And when it comes to all of their toxic traits, when they're willing to get rid of all of their toxic traits, as long as they're working on all of their problems mentally, as long as they're trying to get therapy, trying to seek help, trying to see a psychiatrist, psychologist, or whatever, as long as they're trying to seek help and work on themselves as much as they can, and they know something is wrong, when a therapist or a psychologist, a biased therapist or a biased psychologist, try to convince you that you're wrong and the parent is right, and they be like, no, I clearly was wrong in this. You know what? I don't want to be in this. I was wrong in some parts of this, and you're supposed to help me with it. You're not supposed to help me stay narcissistic. So yeah. So one thing I can say is so one thing I can say is like, for example, if this person doesn't have a growth mentality and things are not getting better, cut them off. Cut them off. And if this person has a growth mentality on some parts, some toxic traits, but doesn't have a growth mentality on some other toxic traits, like if this person has a growth mentality on one toxic trait, but doesn't have a growth mentality on another toxic trait, then you should cut them off. Like, if this person has a growth mentality on, like, for example, how do I say this? On being lazy, but doesn't have a growth mentality on taking responsibility for their actions and crossing boundaries, then you should cut them off. They should have a growth mentality on all of their toxic traits if you want to keep them in your life. Not just some, not just little, and not just most. All of their toxic traits. So yeah, God bless.